I still remember it, the kiss. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a brief moment in the woods behind our homes. The air had smelled like damp earth, the kind of scent that clung to the skin and followed you long after you left. It had been a quiet afternoon, the kind where everything seems frozen in time, and yet it felt like there was something in the air between us, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. We were both young then, still navigating the maze of friendship, yet already skirting the edges of something else, something I couldn't explain. The woods were a familiar playground, a secret space where we often spent hours away from prying eyes. Darian and I had grown up together, side by side, our lives woven so tightly together that it felt like we had always been in sync, like we shared an unspoken understanding of each other. That afternoon, however, was different. We were sitting on the same fallen log where we had spent so many hours before, talking about nothing and everything at once. The world around us felt like it was holding its breath, as though it too could sense that something was about to shift. Darian had been looking at me, his gaze lingering longer than usual, and for a moment, I had no idea what to do with myself. His eyes were a shade darker than I remembered, his expression unreadable. And then it happened, so fast, I almost missed it. Our lips brushed against each other, just the lightest touch, as fleeting as a passing breeze. It was nothing at all, really. But it was everything, at least to me. In that split second, time seemed to collapse around us, and I swear I felt something in me stir, a flutter I couldn't ignore. It was over before I could even fully grasp what had happened. He pulled back, and we both stood there silent. Neither of us spoke a word about it. We didn't have to. It was as if the kiss had never occurred, just a figment of our imagination, a passing moment that didn't belong in the world we had built. We returned to our usual selves, the same banter, the same easy friendship. But there was something in me that had shifted. I didn't understand it at the time, but the feeling stayed with me, like a shadow that I couldn't shake. Years passed, and we drifted in different directions, as life tends to do. But every time Darian came around, that moment in the woods resurfaced, uninvited but undeniable. I tried to push it down, telling myself it was just a fleeting thing, that maybe it meant nothing at all. But deep down, I knew it meant something. Was it just me, or had Darian felt it too? We never spoke of it, and maybe that was for the best. Yet, the question lingered in the air between us every time our paths crossed. Had he forgotten the kiss, or was it still there, just beneath the surface, waiting for us to face it? Darian and I grew up together in a quiet village, a place where the days felt long, and the nights held a serenity that seemed to stretch on forever. Our childhood was spent in endless adventures, climbing trees, riding bikes, running barefoot through fields of tall grass, our laughter echoing into the horizon. The world was simpler back then, and we were inseparable. We shared everything, our secrets, our dreams, our fears. To everyone else, we were just two boys who had known each other since we could walk. But to us, it was something more, something that neither words nor time could explain. People couldn't understand our bond, not the way we did. They'd often call us two peas in a pod, or joke about how we were attached at the hip, but those words never felt right. It wasn't just friendship. It was something deeper, something that went beyond what we could see. Something unspoken, something that had always been there, quietly growing beneath the surface. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more I realized how much it consumed me. There was something in the way he looked at me sometimes, with a gaze that lingered just a second longer than usual, like he was searching for something in me. I didn't know what to make of it, but every time his eyes met mine, it felt like a silent understanding passed between us. A bond that only we could truly feel. But it wasn't just the way he looked at me. It was the little things, the way my heart would race when he laughed, that deep, genuine laugh that seemed to fill up the world around us, making everything seem lighter, brighter. Or how my chest tightened when his fingers brushed against mine, even if it was just by accident, sending an unexpected jolt of warmth through me. And then there were the moments when he'd sit just a little too close, his shoulder grazing mine, and I'd have to swallow the sudden lump in my throat. I wanted to reach out, to say something, anything to break the silence between us, but the words never came. I couldn't tell him. I wasn't brave enough. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I ruined everything? The fear of what might happen kept me silent, locked in my own thoughts, and as the days passed, it became harder to pretend that it was just friendship. Every glance, every touch, Every shared smile became a reminder of what I was too afraid to admit to myself, let alone him. I couldn't stop the way my mind raced when I thought about him, when I imagined us being more than just friends. But I pushed those thoughts away, telling myself that it was just a phase, just a part of growing up. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew something inside of me had shifted, and there was no going back. The more I tried to suppress the feelings, the harder it became to be around him without feeling that unbearable pull. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it, that it was nothing more than the closeness that comes with years of shared history. But the truth was I was scared of what this bond might mean, scared of what it might cost me if I ever dared to acknowledge it out loud. And so, I kept quiet. I kept pretending. But every day, it grew harder to deny that Darian and I shared something that was never meant to be just friendship. Something deeper, something I couldn't name. Something that terrified me. That summer, everything shifted. It was a quiet kind of change, like the first stirrings of a storm that you can't quite feel yet, but you know is coming. We decided to take a trip to a beach town, far away from our village, to escape the familiar. It was just the two of us, alone finally, with nothing to distract us from each other. For the first time, there were no friends around, no family pulling us in different directions. It was just us in this new place, where no one knew our story. The beach town was everything I'd imagined it to be, endless stretches of sand, the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the salty tang of the ocean air. But for me, it was different. It wasn't just about the beauty of the place. It was about the space we now found ourselves in, away from the eyes of our village, where we could truly be alone. And that's when I began to notice the smallest things, the things I hadn't let myself see before. The way Darian looked at me. It wasn't like the casual glances we'd shared in the past. No, this time, there was something more in his eyes, something that lingered, just a moment longer than usual. When he smiled, it wasn't just a smile. It was a quiet confession, like he was letting me in on a secret that neither of us was brave enough to say out loud. And then there were the touches. The subtle things, things that could easily be dismissed as accidents, but I couldn't ignore them anymore. The way his hand lingered on my shoulder when we sat close together on the beach, watching the sun set. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't something that needed to happen. But it did. And when he did that, I could feel a warmth spread through me, a warmth that made it impossible to focus on anything else. His fingers were light against my skin, but it felt like everything was electric in those moments. It was almost like he was testing the waters, just as I had been, but I couldn't bring myself to test them back. The truth was, I didn't know how to deal with it. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about us. My mind was a maze of confusion, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. Was this what I had been avoiding all along? Was this the thing that had been hiding in the back of my mind for years? When we walked along the beach, the sand warm beneath our feet, I couldn't even look him in the eye sometimes, terrified that he could see everything in me. The way my heart would race whenever he was near. The way my breath would hitch when our fingers brushed by accident. I was terrified that he could feel it too. That he could see what I was trying to hide, the thing I wasn't brave enough to admit, even to myself. But we didn't speak about it. Not once. Not even as the days passed, and the tension between us seemed to grow thicker, more palpable with every passing moment. We just existed in this shared space, this strange, quiet space, where everything was unspoken but understood all the same. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was loaded with possibility. It was a kind of unacknowledged understanding that neither of us was ready to confront. But I couldn't deny it anymore. Something had changed. Something had shifted in both of us, and I could feel it like the weight of the ocean pressing against the shore. And I couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could we go on like this, pretending it wasn't there? Then I found out. It wasn't something he told me, not directly, but I had seen the signs, subtle changes in the way Darian acted around me, the way he seemed distant at times, almost as if he was carrying a secret. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking, that I was reading into things that didn't exist. But then I overheard a conversation. It was brief, just a passing exchange, but enough for me to know. Darian had been seeing someone else. I didn't know how to feel, but I felt it, this ache in my chest, a kind of tightness that wouldn't go away, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. jealousy, hurt, betrayal. The emotions were sharp, cutting through me with a rawness I wasn't prepared for. But the hardest part was this: I couldn't let him know. I couldn't let him see how much it hurt to know that someone else had a part of him, someone who wasn't me. I acted like it didn't matter. I kept up the charade, the mask of friendship I had worn for so long. I laughed when he laughed, I joked about nothing, just like we always had. But inside, I was falling apart. Every time I saw him with her, every time he mentioned her name, it felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. I couldn't let him see the hurt, though. I couldn't let him see how badly it affected me. At night, when everything was quiet and the world seemed far away, I would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't escape the thoughts that bombarded me, each one more painful than the last. What was I supposed to do with these feelings? How was I supposed to live in the same space as him, knowing that he had someone else in his life, someone who wasn't me? I didn't know how to process it. I wanted to scream, to ask him why, to demand answers. But I knew that if I did, it would change everything. It would change the way he saw me, and I wasn't sure if I could handle that. I wasn't sure if I could handle him looking at me with pity or, worse, confusion. But the truth was clear now, clearer than I had ever allowed myself to admit. I wasn't just his friend. I was in love with him. And that thought terrified me more than anything else. I had spent years suppressing it, pushing it down into the corners of my mind, telling myself that it was just a phase, that it was nothing more than a passing feeling. But it wasn't. It was real, and it was eating me alive from the inside. What was I supposed to do now? How could I live with this secret, knowing that the one person I loved the most had no idea? I couldn't keep pretending. But I didn't know how to tell him, how to make him understand what was in my heart without losing everything in the process. The secret I kept was suffocating me, and I had no idea how much longer I could hold on. Finally, the tension between us broke. One night we fought. It wasn't loud or angry, it was raw, vulnerable, as if all the things we'd kept inside had finally found a way out. I couldn't stop myself. I told him I was in love with him. The silence that followed crushed me. I didn't expect him to say anything. What could he say? But then he looked at me, really looked at me, and there was something in his eyes. Something that made my heart race. The next time I saw him, I had to tell him again. I needed him to know. I needed to say it out loud, even if it made me vulnerable. So I did. I poured everything out, every feeling I'd kept hidden, every moment I'd tried to ignore. I didn't know if he'd feel the same. I didn't know what I expected. But when I finished speaking, Darian just stood there, silent. The world felt like it stopped. And then, he took a step forward slowly, and I felt his fingers on my cheek. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath until he whispered, "I feel the same way." It was a touch so simple, yet so electrifying. I hadn't been expecting it, hadn't even seen it coming. Darian and I were sitting in the quiet of the room, the only sound between us the soft rustle of the wind outside. Everything felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. We hadn't spoken much in the last few minutes, but there was something in the air between us, something that had shifted, that couldn't be ignored anymore. And then, without warning, his fingers brushed against my cheek, so lightly, so tenderly, that I could hardly believe it. His hand lingered for a moment, just enough for me to feel the warmth of his skin, the gentle pressure of his touch. I felt like I was going to explode. My breath hitched in my throat, and for a second, everything went silent, everything except for the pounding of my heart. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The touch was so simple, yet it sent a shockwave through me, making every nerve in my body stand on end. I could feel the weight of years of unsaid words, of feelings that had built up between us, crashing down in that single moment. I looked up at him, searching his eyes for something, anything, that could give me an answer to the question that had been swirling in my mind for as long as I could remember. And there it was, right in front of me. His eyes were soft, vulnerable, and there was a hint of something else, something deeper, something that mirrored the emotions I'd been hiding for so long. He didn't say a word, but in that brief moment, I knew. He knew. He had always known. Neither of us moved after that. It was like time had stopped, like we were suspended in that moment, unable to go forward or backward. The silence between us was no longer awkward. It was filled with anticipation, with a shared understanding that neither of us had the courage to put into words. And then, without saying anything, without needing to, he leaned in. The movement was slow, deliberate, and I could feel my heart racing faster with each inch he came closer. Our lips met for the first time, not with urgency, not with the desperation I had imagined in my fantasies, but with a soft, gentle tenderness, as if we were both afraid to ruin the moment. His lips brushed against mine, barely touching at first, like a question waiting for an answer. And then it deepened just a little, as if we were both testing the waters, unsure of what we were doing but unable to stop. I could hardly believe it. After all these years, all the moments we had shared, all the unspoken words, we were finally here. The kiss wasn't perfect, but it didn't matter. It felt like everything I had been waiting for, like the world had finally clicked into place. His hand moved to my neck, holding me close, and I could feel the heat between us, the electricity that had been building for so long. For that brief moment, I allowed myself to let go of everything, of the fear, the doubt, the years of wondering whether he would ever feel the same. And as we pulled away, both of us breathless and wide-eyed, there was nothing left to say. The words were unnecessary. Everything that had been unsaid for years was clear now, and I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. Darian was mine. And I was his. It was a beginning, something neither of us had expected, but something we both needed. Something we couldn't deny any longer. After that first kiss, everything changed. I thought I'd be elated, but instead, I was overwhelmed with fear. Could we really do this? Could we really be together? There were so many things to consider. The people around us, the judgment, our own uncertainty. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was a whirlwind of emotions, joy, confusion, doubt. But Darian came to me in the quiet of the night. He didn't say much, just held my hand, and together, we walked under the stars. It was silent, but in that silence, we understood each other better than we ever had. It wasn't easy, being with Darian. There were struggles. We had to fight our own fears, the world's expectations, and our own insecurities. But each time we fell, we found a way to rise. We talked, we argued, we learned. But through it all, we never let go. And I realized, this wasn't just a love story. This was about becoming who we were meant to be together. Now, it's different. We found a place for ourselves, away from the small town that raised us. It's not perfect, and maybe it never will be, but we have each other. And that's all that matters. I used to be afraid of what the future held, but now, all I see is possibility. There are still questions we don't have answers to, but for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. With Darian by my side, I feel like I can face anything. Together, we'll build something beautiful.